Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Michiel van Ratingen. Van Ratingen currently serves as the Secretary General of the European New Car Assessment Program, EuroNCAP, niin kuin me suomalaisittain tunnetaan.
EuroNCAP plays a key role in the vehicle safety across Europe, and Mr. van Ratingen has dedicated his career to improving road safety for everyone. Please join us and welcome Michiel van Ratingen.
Let's give him a big hand.
Thank you.
Stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. It's a pleasure to be here in Helsinki and talk to you about vehicle safety. And I want to explain to you a little bit what the technology of today is in the vehicles and also how we can still use further technology developments to improve vehicle safety on our roads. So I'm working for an organization called EuroNCAP. NCAP stands for New Car Assessment Program. That organization was founded in 1997 and is actually a public-private partnership with various countries and mobility clubs working together to actually improve the safety of vehicles on the road. So what we currently do is actually test roughly 95% of new car models that come to the market and give them a star rating. And this star rating encompasses a lot of testing that we do. All various safety aspects are considered, and we try to give the OEM then a star rating for the new product that he brings to the market. All the information will be visible and studyable for consumers that go to our website. You can actually study for the car that you have in mind how the safety is performing. The star rating system has been very, very efficient in the way that it actually drives innovations. It is a very well-known industry target to develop new cars, and we have actually calculated that over the years we saved almost 130,000 lives by improving the vehicle safety. The essence of the star rating is that the star rating is always evolving. So it started with simple crash tests, but later on we saw other technologies being offered by vehicle manufacturers, and we developed tests for them to actually see if the technology is working or not, and actually incorporated that into the 5-star communication that we give on each vehicle. And I talk about crash tests, the ones in blue here, and things like whiplash performance for head injury, but also lately, of course, in the last decade, more and more driver assistance systems were included in the star rating. Now, as a result, I think every car that you buy comes with a lot of safety. You don't even have to ask for it today. It's the fact of the matter that every car has various elements already standard included. And this can go from the design of the front end to make sure that if you are running into a pedestrian or a cyclist, that you're not necessarily killing that person, to all the equipment on the car, airbags, seat belts, crumble zones, everything is there. But also things like sensors, camera systems that actually help you prevent crashes, so that are actually helping you support and be safe on the road. So all of that, of course, comes with a price, but it's now more or less standard and available actually on every vehicle that you buy, small or large. Now the consequence of that process that has taken almost 15, 20 years to complete, is that we actually here in Europe are very fortunate that we have one of the most safest roads in the world. So driving around in Europe in general, also here in Finland, you're actually much better off, you're much better safe than if you drive in Africa or in Southeast Asia or anywhere else on the road. Despite the fact that the number of cars actually has increased by 20% in the last 15 years, we see actually a drop of fatal fatalities by almost 50%, which is amazing if you think about that now you actually only have half of the fatalities that you only had 15 years ago. Of course, there are still things to consider, still things to think about. One is that half of all the people that are being killed on a road are actually pedestrians and cyclists, motorcyclists. They are not in the vehicle, but they're outside the vehicle. So we have to really pay attention to how we arrange traffic, how we organize our infrastructure to make sure that we are not creating these conflict situations. Other than that, I think there are some clear market trends visible in the market as well. Some of them are really explicitly visible here in Finland as well. The fact that the new car sales are a bit slowing down. Cars are getting older and older. In general, I think in Europe, the average age of a vehicle today on the road is 12.5 years old. Here in Finland, it's already more than a year longer, so 13.6 is the number exactly for Finland, which means that the cars that you actually drive are quite old and quite behind in terms of what technology could mean. We also have seen other trends. Electrification, for instance, is a very obvious one. So we see more and more EVs on the market that are significantly heavier than the ones that came before. But we also see a consumer trend towards driving bigger vehicles. So SUVs, the market share of SUVs significantly increased over the years. So I want to talk a little bit about how vehicle safety is evolving. So I think we can look back and be quite satisfied with what has been achieved, but there are also still some remaining challenges. And I will talk you through each of them. We talk a little bit about ADAS, a little bit about aging drivers, about modern car design and how that affects sort of the work that the firefighters need to do when you are in an accident. And at last, I also want to talk a little bit about not the passenger cars, but the commercial fleets, which we also have examples here on the show. So first of all, maybe a little bit about crash avoidance. Now, crash avoidance, driver assistance systems, in the public mind are often seen as gadgets that are not necessarily, that make the car expensive, but they're not delivering. We now know, after 10, 15 years of working with ADAS and studying the effect of ADAS, is that ADAS in general is actually quite effective. It actually is, in some cases, reducing crashes by more than 50% in some cases. So rear-end crashes, for instance, are addressed by auto braking quite effectively. So a car that has this technology is much less likely to be in a crash than a car that doesn't have the technology. Overall, I would say there is still some improvement necessary of driver assistance in the marketplace. Those of you that drive ADAS systems, cars with ADAS systems, have noticed that ADAS sometimes does weird things, interacts or doesn't work at times that you really want them to work. And that has to do with the limitations of the current technology. So one of the issues that we have is that everything is based on cameras, LiDAR, sensors, radar sensors. And of course, these technologies have grown and get better over time, but there is still more potential to do more. Also a question about how these cars that can actually look around and have cues from the environment, how that works together with the environment itself. A clear example is speed assistance, for instance. It's a technology that helps the driver maintain the right speed. If the signage on the road is incorrect or not there or obscure, or the map is not updated to the latest situation, you can imagine that the car receives the wrong information. And this is very annoying for the driver because he knows, no, I'm going to do 50, and suddenly the car says, well, you only may do 30, or you can do 80 here. So this is very important, is that the car development and the road development somehow are synchronized and stay tuned on each other. I think what is also clearly an effect, and I mentioned it already, is this aging vehicle fleet effect. The fact that a lot of these technologies actually came in the last 10 years of our time means that a lot of cars that you actually see driving around would not have ADAS or have an ADAS generation which is actually quite old and poorly performing. So in that sense, we think that it's important that people always consider to continue to drive a car or to change to something better. Even a second-hand, better car, more recent car, actually can deliver really benefits. I would say in the context of ADAS, you also see more and more cars being equipped with assisted driving systems. What are these? These are systems that are comfort systems that help you drive on a highway, that give you support. It's often ACC, cruise control, together with lane keeping. So it basically tells the car, stay on the lane. I'm going to support the driver and make the driving experience very relaxed. In the latest generation of these systems, you can even take your hands off the wheel as long as you have your eyes on the road. You need to have the driver as a checkup of the car's performance in general. What is very important here is the technology that is behind that, which is the driver monitoring technology. Every car that you see here, Polestar, Volvo, Mercedes, they all have, if you watch carefully, cameras inside the cabin that actually looks at your face. Why is this done? This is done not to try to recognize who you are or to film you. Actually, this is only to see if you actually pay attention. If you're not doing other stuff that you're not supposed to do. In other words, if you keep attention to the driving task, this camera will not bother you. But if you start to do different things, the car will say, hold on, you have to pay attention because your eyes are off the road. There could potentially be a crash occurring if you continue to do that. And we know for a fact that about 30% of all crashes are as a result of either fatigue or people not paying attention, are distracted, doing other things than paying attention to the road. So driver monitoring technology, as you will see, it's a technology that is fast developing. We are actually not there at the end stage. I think there's still a lot more potential in this technology, but it will come as well. The last point I want to mention here is HMI. So the interface with the cars are also changing rapidly. If you study the cars here, you will see that many offer touchscreens. And I think the industry is very rapidly going in this direction, perhaps sometimes a bit too far, if you ask me, because a lot of driver control are also now on touchscreens. So we think that this potentially may be causing an issue. In reality, if things like wipers and indicators are now also on the touchscreen behind menus, it doesn't really make sense. So we are more in favor of keeping some sort of a general layout of buttons available for very basic driver controls that are very easy to find and very easy to use. Good. I'm talking a little bit about the aging society. So in Europe, we are very fast moving to an aging society where I think in 10 years from now, we will have about 30% of the population being 16 years or older. This is a really significant impact on everything in the society, but also on car driving. So today's cars are basically designed for an average young person, actually, to be really honest. All the restraint system, the belt systems, all the HMI is all very futuristic. It's made for younger people that can easily adapt to different styles and have a good vulnerability. If you really look at what is happening on the road, you see in this picture here is actually showing you these graphs of what are the highest risk age groups on the road. And of course, you know that younger people have a very high risk. And this is not because they're very vulnerable, it's because they take risks when driving. They like to speed, they don't estimate risk very well, and therefore they're much quicker involved in crashes. But on the other end of the scale, you see also that it actually is a significantly higher risk. So if you're older than 60, and certainly older than 70, you see really that the risk is increasing. So even moderate crashes can lead to fatalities for older people. So that's really something to keep in mind. If we think about the cars that we want to develop for the next 20 years, we need to make sure that if our population gets older, that cars are actually designed for older people as well. And that has to do with many aspects. I mentioned here a few of them. Adaptive restraints is one of them. So we now are in the position in the car that we can identify and estimate the age of the driver. And this can be used to optimize your restraint system, for instance. The airbag, how aggressive the airbag is, how aggressive the seat belts are. This can be tuned as long as you know the age of the person. Also, the ADAS and the controls of the systems, specifically for older people, we need to think through how to do a better job and make sure that also older people are using driver assist systems. Another thing here is this electric vehicle warning sounds. So you have noticed that EVs almost make no sounds anymore. And this is particularly interesting, of course, and dangerous for elderly people if they don't see a car coming, don't hear a car coming. Of course, that's why elderly people are most at risk as vulnerable road users, in fact, because they basically are easily caught in the traffic, so to speak. A little bit about post-crash rescue. I said I wanted to talk a little bit about what new cars are bringing in additional challenges. If you look at a car today, it's actually much more complex of a system than it used to be. Right? So it has a lot of electronics, but underneath the bonnet, there are also changes that really have made cars much more complex. There are deployable systems in the car, not only airbags, but also deployable bonnets, for instance, with pistons and actuators that can explode. So if you can imagine that a firefighter is called to a scene at a crash, he wants to very clearly understand what car is in front of him, so that he can very quickly extricate the person or persons out of the vehicle. It's no longer the case that they can easily cut wherever they need to cut. It's quite dangerous for them because of the fact that there are all these actuators. There are sometimes very high-strength steel areas where you basically cannot use tools anymore to cut. And of course, you have the battery technology, which is now the batteries are getting bigger. If fire is there, you can see what the effect can be, but you can also think about electric shock that can occur if the battery hasn't switched off, for instance. So all these things are actually challenges for first responders. Now, how do you address that? You don't address it to try to prevent these innovations. These innovations are occurring. But what you can do is actually make sure that the firefighters can very quickly and easily identify the vehicle and know exactly how to find it. So our organization developed this rescue app. It's an app that is on your phone. It's free of charge. You can download it. And for each vehicle on the market, you can actually see information presented, which can be read by firefighters, that tells exactly what the issues are with this car, how to approach it, how to open the doors, etc., etc. So this is very, very an important fact that we need to not forget about, because cars are going to be everywhere on the road, and they will be in accidents, of course, like any other car. Last bit, I want to talk a little bit about not the passenger cars, but the commercial vehicles. So what about the commercial vehicles? So commercial vehicles, we talk about commercial vans, and we talk about heavy trucks. So heavy trucks, of course, are overrepresented in crashes, in fatal crashes, not because there are many trucks on the road, but the fact that they are very heavy. They make a lot of miles compared to a normal passenger car, and they're often very long on the road. So it's not unusual that a truck does 15 or 20 years on the road, and every day it makes kilometers. So how do we look at vehicle safety when it comes to trucks and vans? It's interesting to see that if there are fatalities in crashes, they are almost always outside of the truck or outside of the van. And that's normal because the vans and the trucks are significantly heavier. So it's even if they come into an accident with a normal car, they sort of dominant, and they basically put all the energy into the other vehicle. But also in city environments, you have the same problem. You have a lot of pedestrian cyclists being killed every day in cities around Europe by trucks. And the main reasons for it are, I mentioned here on the slide, are either driver fatigue or impairment or distraction. So the truck driver is looking at his phone, seeing where the next delivery address is, and he misses to see that the cyclist is next to him, and there is a blind spot or a limited visibility, and ultimately he leaves the path and crushes the cyclist or the pedestrian. Speeding on the highways is also an issue, and of course loss of control. Certainly here in Finland, where you have icy conditions, bad weather conditions, bad roads sometimes on rural areas. These are of course the causes why we still see a significant amount of truck crashes on our roads. Now how could we actually try to address that? Again, it comes down to the technology that is available. Many of the technologies that are in passenger cars are not available for commercial vehicles. But you can think about it. You can actually see developments about autonomous emergency braking. Here you see an example of a truck that wants to cross, and it actually automatically stops because the camera has seen the cyclist, while the driver didn't see the cyclist. Same for lane support systems, emergency lane keeping. So if a truck is actually wants to leave the lane and a car is in the blind spot, the truck will actually be pushed back into the lane and the driver will be warned. Driver monitoring for distraction and for impairment, direct vision, indirect vision. So direct vision means the design of the cabin. Indirect vision means the usage of cameras and additional sensors to actually support the driver in its visibility. And of course, speed assistance is also important, as well as rescue information, because here in Europe we also see a trend to electrification of trucks in general. So with that, I really would like to conclude. I think that in general, I would say we have really, the technology on our vehicles in Europe has really had a big impact on fatality reduction. So we can be happy about that. We can be, I think, proud on that. We know that the safety technology that's on our vehicles is actually doing a good job. It's very cost effective and very, very effective. But I would say, don't take it for granted. So there are also brands that try to take equipment out, safety out, to keep prices lower. And please be mindful if you buy a new car. There is information out there provided by EuroNCAP. You can look at it for every car that you want to buy. Is this car comparable? What kind of star rating does it have? How did it do in the safety test? It's only 5 minutes to check it, but it can save you or your family's lives. I would say that we are not yet done. I tried to explain a little bit the new technologies like driver monitoring playing a role. So the innovations that we see today are there to really help address the remaining issues, but also maybe the future issues that we may incur in the next decades, including elderly society and so on. So thank you very much for listening. I hope it was interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michiel. It was a great presentation, and if you only have a couple of minutes, I would like to ask you some questions to continue this interesting topic. One thing that came to my mind when I was listening to you is that when I watched your slides, there were plenty of male figures.
Yeah.
And if I've let myself understood correctly, many of these safety equipments have been planned in recent years for an average male body.
Correct. Yeah.
Is it still so?
It's not really so, but it's certainly still a kind of a legacy issue in safety and community, that a lot of the information that was used to originally design safety technology was actually based on males. It's still the case in Europe that there are still 50% more males being killed in traffic than females. So females are just safer drivers in general. But that doesn't mean that our safety systems should not be developed for everybody. Yeah? So I think it's a clear challenge also for ourselves to further make sure that what we develop is safe for everybody. Not just safe for a certain population of young drivers, but for females, for elderly people, but even for obese people. So I think there's a lot of challenges there. But it comes down to how you engineer the safety technology under the bonnet, so to speak.
It's an interesting topic, and it was a good explanation. We will be talking later today about a group of young men who are taking probably way too many risks while driving, and we can see the consequences. Are there any steps that could be still taken to prevent these accidents?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that young people cannot afford the cars that actually are the safest. So they end up buying very old car, or even something like a micro vehicle, like a L7 as we call them, which have very poor protection in general compared to a passenger car. So I think the solution is partly to convince them to buy better vehicles, but also maybe to have incentives for insurance discounts for younger people, if they are willing, for instance, to apply a speed limitation in their driving. So if they commit to do that, and you can do it by app nowadays, by apps that are linked and send data to insurance companies. So I mean, these solutions are there to help driver keep the speed down, to behave.
Yeah.
But if they can then get discounts on the insurance, then it makes it a little bit more affordable to go to a more expensive vehicle.
Yeah.
So I would really look into this kind of solutions that sort of do a little bit to create a market for younger drivers.
But what would you say, is this a topic or an issue that we can basically solve with technology, because it's a lot of behavior?
Yeah, so I think there's certainly assist technology around that can probe the driver a little bit in better behaving.
Yeah.
But of course, young people are known to be disregarding the rules, right?
Yeah.
That's, if you're young, you do that. So I think it's not just a matter of technology. I think the technology is there to support, but we need to have more than just the technology to do this. Yeah.
I understand. And it was an interesting topic when you were talking about cameras focusing on the driver.
Yeah.
And that's a new technology that is still developing.
Yeah.
And how does it work if the driver does this with their cell phones? Does it recognize that as a disturbing behavior?
So it's actually reading your eyes and your movement of your head, as well as the movement of your eyes. So this is, and as well as your mouth. So they can see if you're laughing or if you're stressed. All that stuff is actually classified. So it's a matter of AI software behind it that has looked at millions and millions of faces and classified that. And that is basically used in the software to actually see if a person is staring away from the road. So they can see that from your pupils, basically, and how your eyes are. And if you focus on something which is close by on your phone, your pupils have a different shape than if you focus on the road, which is quite far away. So all of that is actually measured by these cameras. And as I said, they are not recording. It's not a camera in the common sense that you and me know cameras. They're not recording anything, but they take the features out of the image that they need to identify the state of the driver.
And what happens when the camera recognizes that this driver is not focusing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Well, you don't want to bring a system in the market that is very annoying, right? So that's, of course, always the downside of these technologies, is that they then suddenly start to warn the driver all the time. So for us, there are various things you can do. You can start by information, which is more, if, for instance, the coffee cup systems, maybe you've seen those. If you're really tired after a while, then you can have a soft reminder of the driver, take a break. Right? So this is not urgent. If you look at phone use, it's actually more urgent because you have small glances often. You go from the road to your phone, back to the road. And this needs a warning. It needs to basically either an audible warning or a visual warning or both in your dashboard to say, stop. And if you see it repeatedly, then you can actually start to change some of the things in the car. For instance, forward collision warning, which is an auto type technology that starts to warn if you are too close to another car. The setting of this, whether the warning comes early or later, can be tuned on behalf of, based on the camera. So if the camera knows that you're consistently not paying attention, the warning will come much earlier than if you are always paying attention and the camera sees that. They say, well, I don't need to warn this driver, he pays attention. Right? So you see that the car can actually, in the background, change a few settings with this information.
My last question goes, you mentioned that you don't want this new technology to be too annoying.
Yes.
And am I right? Many drivers feel like this peeping and the sounds and everything, they are pretty annoying and they want to put those off.
Yes.
Is it so?
That's certainly, for some of them, there are certain systems that are much more annoying than others, I have to say. So I think the lane support systems are in the category of what people really don't like. And so for us, that means that we have to do much better job in making these systems more intuitive. And it's possible now because the first generation basically only looked at the line on the road. If you cross the line, whether there's oncoming traffic or not, it starts to warn. Is this necessary? Probably not, right? So now we have radars on the car, so they can actually see if there is potentially a risk. So the newer generation of lane support systems will actually only warn you if there's actually a risk that you get either off the road completely or you drive into another vehicle, oncoming vehicle or overtaking vehicle, right? So because we have the sensor available, you see that the technology gets better and better in also suppressing the annoying warnings, because we don't want that. We want people to enjoy driving. We want people to enjoy the additional safety that they can buy, and they should not be faced with these complaints, I would say.
Michiel, thank you so much for your time and sharing all this. Thank you.
Thank you.